There is an old saying often attributed to Navy SEALs: slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Whether those exact words originated there doesn't really matter, but like most enduring sayings, it has survived because it captures something that feels deeply true. When the stakes are high, moving carefully is often the fastest way to reach the outcome you actually want. I found myself thinking about that idea repeatedly over the last few weeks. Not because anyone has been moving slowly, it is actually the opposite. People are trying to move increasingly faster. I've spent the last several weeks in conversations with remarkably intelligent and highly capable people who are working tirelessly to help their organizations transform in profound ways. Much of that work centers around adopting and scaling artificial intelligence across large populations of knowledge workers. The objectives are ambitious. The work is complex. The pressure to demonstrate progress is real. And almost every conversation I have been in eventually arrives at some version of the same question: how do we move faster? But before we go any further, let me take a minute to introduce myself, if you are new here. My name is Chris Schmelzer, and I serve leaders who recognize the need and understand that the old models of leading and working are no longer keeping up with the pace of change. Every week, I track the subtle signals that a massive reset is coming for what we refer to as white-collar work, and share thoughts on how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change. If you find any value in this video, like it, share your comments below, and subscribe. How do we move faster is an understandable question. Shareholders want returns on their investments. Boards operate with a fiduciary responsibility to deliver those returns. Executives are expected and measured against their ability to demonstrate progress. Every new AI capability promises greater productivity, lower costs, and better financial performance. The incentives all point in the same direction: speed. I don't think this is unique to any one organization. Something much larger appears to be unfolding across nearly every white-collar workplace. In some organizations, it is intentional and highly orchestrated. In others, it is happening more organically, as individuals begin incorporating increasingly capable tools into their everyday work. Regardless, organizations everywhere seem to be reorganizing themselves around the same basic expectation: we need to move faster. The interesting part, though, isn't the pursuit of speed itself. It's what can get sacrificed when speed becomes the primary measure of progress. As I observe more and more teams, I have started wondering whether we have become so accustomed to operating this way that we no longer even notice it. Like a fish swimming in water, are they even aware that they are in water? Some of the most influential forces in our lives are the ones we stop noticing altogether. That has become my growing suspicion about the increasing pace of work inside organizations. I've spent more than a decade sitting inside leadership meetings across industries, countries, regions, and functions. What I've begun noticing isn't simply that people are busy or disengaged or burned out. Everyone already knows that, or you can read any headline about it. What I am noticing is something subtler. The accelerated pace of work has become so normal that few of us stop to ask what that pace is doing to the quality of our thinking. Meetings rarely begin on time because everyone is arriving late from another meeting that also ran over. 30-minute meetings attempt to solve problems that probably deserved an hour or maybe even 90 minutes. Calendars leave almost no space between conversations. People arrive carrying the cognitive residue of whatever they were discussing 5 minutes earlier and immediately begin talking about something completely different. Because the meeting is compressed, the conversation becomes compressed with it. We ask fewer questions. We quickly jump toward conclusions. And we rely on familiar language because familiar language is a shortcut. And increasingly, I think this is where something important begins to break down. Someone says, "We need better governance." Someone else responds, "I completely agree." The meeting moves on. But what did the first person actually mean by governance? A decision-making structure? Accountability? An internal AI use policy? A group of people responsible for managing risk? A process for approving new tools? Perhaps everyone around the table heard the same word while imagining something completely different. No one stops to ask. No one summarizes what they think they heard. No one checks whether the people around the table are actually attaching the same meaning to the language being used. Instead, Everyone nods. We mistake agreeableness for alignment, and alignment for shared understanding. The distinction might seem small, but I am beginning to think it is enormous, because those people leave the meeting and begin acting on what they believe was decided. One team moves in one direction, another moves in a slightly different direction. Someone else creates a presentation explaining the strategy. Another meeting gets scheduled to resolve the confusion. More people get invited, more information gets created, the organization gets busier. But did anything actually move forward? The 10 minutes we save by not establishing shared understanding doesn't disappear. We borrow it from the future, with interest. It comes back as another meeting, a revised presentation, duplicated work, an escalation, a delayed decision, or two teams unknowingly solving different versions of the same problem. This is where the paradox of speed has started becoming much more interesting to me. Artificial intelligence promises to help organizations process information faster than at any point in history. We can already produce analyses, presentations, strategies, summaries, emails, recommendations, and ideas in a fraction of the time they once required. And those capabilities will only continue to improve. They will immensely get better in the coming months and become even more widely adopted and used, which means organizations are about to become extraordinarily good at producing information. But what if information isn't actually the constraint? What if the constraint is our collective ability to make sense of all that information together? The more I sit inside these organizations, the more I wonder whether human coordination, interpretation, and shared meaning are becoming the real bottlenecks of organizational performance. And if that is true, the continued emergence of artificial intelligence begins to create an interesting paradox. The faster we become capable of producing information, the more time we may actually need to spend understanding what all of that information means. Because more information doesn't necessarily produce more understanding, it actually starts to create more possibilities to interpret, or more recommendations to evaluate, or more options to consider, or more decisions to make. All of these result in more language, whose meaning needs to be understood by the people expected to act on it. In other words, the thing becoming abundant may actually increase the demand for the thing that remains scarce. If information becomes abundant, does shared understanding become the scarce resource? I don't know that organizations are prepared for that, let alone even recognize that it might be happening. And how would they? Almost every conditioned response inside the system is telling them to do the opposite. For decades, we have designed organizations around the assumption that efficiency creates advantage. As a result, we shortened meetings, increased spans of control, automated processes, centralized work to reduce redundancy, filled calendars with back-to-back meetings, added more communication channels, built dashboards so information could travel more quickly. All of this was in an effort to remove friction from the movement of information. Historically, a lot of that made sense. But I wonder whether we removed some forms of friction that were actually useful. Maybe some friction isn't inefficiency. Maybe it's what allows understanding to form. The pause before responding. The question that makes everyone slightly uncomfortable. The 5 minutes spent making sure everyone means the same thing when they say transformation. The conversation that doesn't immediately produce a decision, but changes how everyone understands the problem. Don't get me wrong. Some of the best leaders still do these things. However, more and more, these behaviors look inefficient when measured against a ticking clock. In reality, though, they aren't inefficient at all. That is actually what the work is. But often it becomes overlooked because we are consumed with moving faster. That brings me back to slow is smooth and smooth is fast. The paradox isn't that organizations need to slow down while the world accelerates around them. That would be impossible and somewhat foolish. The paradox is that moving at the speed this emerging economy demands may require becoming much more intentional about where we refuse to move quickly. There will be places where artificial intelligence allows us to move extraordinarily fast. And there will be moments where the fastest thing an organization can do is spend another 10 minutes making sure everyone actually understands one another. The challenge, I suspect, will be knowing the difference. Because right now, many organizations appear to be applying the same answer everywhere. Go faster, more meetings, faster decisions, shorter conversations, more analysis, more productivity, more slides, more information. And because everyone around us is operating the same way, it feels completely normal. We are the fish swimming in the water. Except we are largely unaware of how much the current has accelerated. And I wonder whether the reckoning coming from many organizations won't simply be about how quickly they adopt and scale artificial intelligence inside the organization. It may be discovering that the habits they developed in pursuit of efficiency have quietly become the bottleneck to the speed they are now trying so desperately to create. Organizations built for information processing may be entering an economy where information itself is no longer scarce. Which makes me wonder whether the constraint is moving somewhere else, toward our ability to coordinate with one another, to interpret what all of this information actually means, to create enough shared understanding that people can act together. If that's true, then the leaders and organizations that create the greatest advantage over the next decade may not necessarily be the ones moving the fastest right now. They may be the ones aware enough to recognize the moments when slowing down is actually the fastest way forward. If you want to explore how to lead yourself and your organization through the age of accelerating change, my new book, The Missing Link, offers a new lens. It shows why most change efforts stall and how human capacity, not just strategy, determines success. Once you see it, you'll lead change very differently. You can access it for free right now. Link is below the video.